Hello, Springfield College alums, friends at Reed's Landing, and friends in our Learning and Later Life program. My name is Tammy Cadess Lucy. I'm a member of the class of 1981 and the graduate class of 1982, and I have the privilege of serving Springfield College as the alumni director. And I will tell you, it is a pleasure each and every day to get up and come to work at this college that means so much to so many. It is a pleasure to welcome you to our first ever wellness webinar. We are hoping that this is going to be first in a series of this type of program. And we also want you to know, because this is our first venture in this area, there may be a couple of glitches tonight, and we hope that you will just bear with us. We're very excited about this program and very excited to have you tuning in. We want you to note that as we come to the end of the program, you will see 3 pieces of information up on your screen. You will see a phone number to phone questions in at the end, a phone number to text questions in, and also an email address where you may email any of your questions in. Our panelists will do their best to get all of those questions answered before we leave this evening. Before we get going, I do want to acknowledge one very special person. You will never see him on camera this evening. He is a senior at Springfield College. His name is Stephen Monahan. He is a sports journalism major, and he will be the producer-director of this evening's program. I now want to introduce 3 very special Springfield College family members. The first of our 2 panelists, Dr. Maura Bergen, grad class of 14, PhD in 2017, Assistant Professor of Exercise Science and Sports Study. Dr. Liz O'Neill, grad class of 03, Associate Professor of Exercise Science and Sports Study, and Applied Exercise Science Program Director. And lastly, a gentleman who needs no introduction, I am sure, to anyone who is out there this evening. He was one of my favorite faculty members, Charlie Redman, class of 68, grad class of 71, and retired Dean of the School of Health, Physical Education, and Recreation. Charlie, it's a pleasure.
Tammy, thank you very much for a very kind and gracious introduction. This is really a very special evening to be part of this inaugural event. And speaking with the other presenters who you'll hear from shortly, we're very excited about being a part of this. We feel this is a special opportunity at several levels. First of all, it continues to reinforce Springfield College's role as a national leader in health, physical education, and the exercise and health sciences. Another opportunity is to connect with alums and friends of Springfield College who we'd not typically see on campus. And thirdly, as a former administrator, I'm very proud of our faculty. It's an opportunity to showcase some of our really very special faculty who are making a difference in the area of wellness. I'd like to start with an interesting sidebar, that for those of you who took exercise physiology in the 60s and 70s or 80s with Dr. Kopovich or Dr. Sinning will remember that the labs and part of those courses were taught in Weiser Hall. What I find really ironic in a great way this evening is this particular production studio, and the one you will see later, is in that same general area. It has been reconverted to the communication, sports journalism production studios, and I find that really fascinating. I expect that the spirits of Dr. Kopovich and Dr. Sinning might be listening. When asked last spring to put together a program on wellness and aging, I was very interested and exciting. First of all, I had taught personal health for many years, and secondly, I'm certainly of the age demographic that we're directing most of the presentation toward tonight. So I went back and looked for some of my lecture notes, and actually I had some. And I looked up the term health, I think what today we call wellness. The contemporary definition for health back in the 70s was the absence of disease. Since then, health, or what we call today wellness, is dramatically, in a good way, more complex and holistic. What is wellness? I think it's important that we set the theme and we start thinking about wellness before the 2 doctors share with us some of their points. There are lots of definitions of wellness. One I would like to share with you, which is certainly Springfield College, defines wellness as a practical, holistic philosophy that encourages a lifestyle that enhances spirit, mind, and body. Let's try that one again. It defines wellness as a practical, holistic philosophy that encourages a lifestyle that enhances spirit, mind, and body. Within the definition of wellness, they typically find dimensions of wellness. And again, there are many lists of dimensions as there are many definitions of wellness. But they almost always include dimensions of emotional wellness, physical wellness, intellectual wellness, occupational wellness, spiritual and social wellness. They each appear to be quite different, but in reality they're interconnected, and strong wellness programs really need to be interconnected. How does wellness affect each of us? I think the one difference between teaching health back in the 70s and teaching wellness today, that the amount of research that's been done showing the benefits of wellness has been absolutely dramatic. It clearly points out that individuals who embrace a wellness lifestyle as they age are very likely to experience significant benefits, possibly including enhanced quality of life, higher levels of functional and cognitive health, fewer chronic diseases, and increased longevity. Now, to get us thinking about wellness a little bit, I'm going to give a little retirement story about Bob. Bob had worked at the company for about 40 years and retired and was very excited. The company threw him a party and all sorts of refreshments. He got all sorts of gifts. And Bob left work on his last day, which was a Friday, and went home. And that weekend he did his typical things and enjoyed himself. And then his first Monday of retirement came, and he slept in an extra 30 minutes. He got up, he got dressed, he went out to the front door, stood on the steps and waited for retirement to be delivered. Well, it was never delivered. And Bob's retirement was not very fulfilled. It was not very enjoyable because he did not have a plan. Wellness, like retirement, needs a plan. And the elements of those plans for success requires time and intentionality. It's an active process. It's an ongoing process. It requires awareness of one's life and paying attention, taking time and responsibility for one's health and wellness, and requires making knowledgeable choices. And we're hoping the information we share with you this evening will provide more knowledge. This evening's program will focus on the physical dimension. The objectives are quite simple: share current science and strategies to enhance the physical dimensions of wellness, emphasizing practical, usable information. Secondly, to inform some viewers that their wellness plan is right on track. Bravo to that group. And thirdly, encourage others to take more responsibility for their wellness and develop an expanded wellness plan. Those are our objectives for the evening. To accomplish that, we have two of our finest faculty members that Tammy just introduced, and I would just add that Dr. O'Neill's resume includes she has done extensive research on exercise and bone density, and that Dr. Bergen is the instructor of our course in special populations and exercise. So I'll now turn the program over to Dr. Bergen and to Dr. O'Neill.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth O'Neill.
And I'm Maura Bergen.
Thank you for joining us this evening to hear our presentation entitled Living in Spirit, Mind, and Body, Wellness for Daily Living. So we're going to go back and forth between showing you some slides and having a discussion on some aspects related to the physical aspect of wellness. So to start off, we'd like to ask you a question. When you think about your day and the things you go about throughout your day, are there any challenges that you may face physically to accomplish those tasks? And on our slides, you can see a couple of checkpoints that we have questions for. Do you struggle to climb stairs, get out of your car, or get up and carry activities or items that you're doing throughout the day, lifting objects? Do you get winded or have shortness of breath during activities of daily living? Does your mobility or flexibility limit the things that you can do? Or do you experience frequent falls or a loss of balance? There may also be some other challenges that you may face engaging in physical activities throughout the day. So take note of those. That's a good way to assess kind of where you are with regards to your physical abilities, and then things that may limit that. So within that, one of the things you want to do, in addition to kind of looking at those issues, you may want to also do some formal assessments that can give you a little bit more structure and information regarding where you stand compared to some norm data. So what Dr. Bergen and I have developed is a series of some common assessments that are utilized to determine where you stand with regards to areas of fitness. So again, we have issues associated with strength, endurance, flexibility, proprioception, and balance. So on our slides, we have an image of some of the various assessments that you can do. If you look at the next slide, the chair stand test is a pretty standard assessment that can be used to determine your lower body strength. To complete this assessment, you have someone utilize a chair that does not have arms, and then you sit in the chair, kind of sitting forward slightly with your arms crossed across your chest, as you can see in the picture. And then you try to stand up and sit back down for a duration of 30 seconds. So you can test yourself doing the chair stand test and then compare those scores that you have based on your age bracket with the norm data that we've provided on the slide. This gives you an indication as to where you may fall with regards to your lower body strength. This may be something that falls into affecting your ability to climb stairs, to get up and down off of the toilet or out of the bed, doing activities, getting out of a car, for example, that may prove challenging throughout your day. And if that's the case, you may want to look at engaging in an exercise prescription that will assist you with lower body strength, which Dr. Bergen will talk about later. The next assessment looks at your mobility, particularly within the upper body, doing what's called a back scratch test. So for this assessment, you simply take your arms when you're standing, and you're going to bring them behind your back and reach to see what the distance is between your two arms. So here you can see a picture of the individual with their arms behind their back. And as they reach back, you can get an idea through using a measurement tape and assess the distance between your two hands. It's good to do this both on the right and left side in order to look at potential mobility imbalances on your right and left. And again, you can see some norm data that's there based on age categories and the distances that are represented. If you can touch your hands together, that's a really good sign that you have good mobility. If one side has a greater distance than the other, that gives you an indication that you have some imbalances there and want to work on range of motion throughout those different areas. The next assessment is also a mobility assessment, but this is now looking at mobility of the lower portion of the body with the legs or the hamstrings as well as low back. So in this, you're going to sit on a chair, as you can see in the picture, with the chair positioned up against a wall. And you're going to have one knee bent at 90 degrees while the other leg is extended fully. And you're going to reach out and see how close you can get to touching your toes. There's norm data presented in the table based on, again, age and gender, so you can determine where you fall within your flexibility ranges. These two flexibility assessments can give you an indication as to whether or not you need to work on your mobility and incorporating that throughout your training programs. The next assessment is looking more at proprioception. Now, proprioception is our ability or sense to detect our body's awareness in space, so where our joints are, where our hands are, where our feet are, where our head is in space, and that is really important for stability and balance. Some basic tests for proprioception are shown here. So first is a finger to nose test. So you can close your eyes, hold your arm out to the side, and then try to touch your nose and see if you're able to accurately touch your nose with your eyes closed. Another assessment that's used more commonly in research is to have someone close their eyes or blindfold them and then ask them to reproduce a particular angle at a given joint. In this picture, it's showing someone flexing at the elbow and trying to produce a given angle here, which is about 90 degrees. Based on what your desired angle is and what angle is perceived by the individual, gives you an indication as to how accurate their proprioceptive sense is. If you're asking for them to get to 90 degrees and they maybe get to 120 and they're not quite at 90, that's an indication that their proprioceptive sense is slightly off. That might be an indication that they have some compromised proprioceptive ability and therefore are at an increased risk for falling. The next assessment is a little bit more of a standard fall risk assessment known as the Romberg balance test. In this, individuals stand with their feet positioned close together, their eyes closed, and then you ask them to close their eyes for a duration of approximately 30 seconds and see how long they're able to hold it. If they reach the 30 seconds without having to regain their balance or take a step, then that's a good indication that proprioception is functioning very well. If, however, within that 30-second time period, they start to lose their balance, have to take a step, proprioceptive sense is starting to decline, and there's a risk for falling. These are all basic assessments that can be done to kind of determine where someone stands with regards to their physical health and wellness. So we want to test these things, and these are simple assessments that you can do at home, and then use that information to then design your exercise program to try to improve on these categories and then reassess after a period of time. The body obviously undergoes numerous physiological changes as we age. Unfortunately, even in this image here, Superman and Batman and all of the characters, we do get older. There's no ability to fight the aging process. However, we can age gracefully and engage in physical activities that will help to reduce the declines that we see. When we look at some of the major functions that influence our ability to engage in daily activities, aspects such as cardiovascular fitness have numerous changes that we undergo throughout the aging process. The heart doesn't contract as well. We see a reduced return of blood flow to the heart, which reduces our stroke volume, which is the amount of blood that we pump out per beat. And when we don't pump out as much blood per beat, we then rely on the heart rate to increase in order to keep our cardiac output, which is the amount of blood that we pump out per minute. We also see typically an increase in blood pressure as we age and decrease in vascular compliance. Essentially, all of these changes that are listed on here indicate that the heart is having to work harder in order to do normal daily tasks as well as physical activity that we may incur. Exercise can help to essentially manage some of these changes and reduce the influence of aging on the heart. The heart can become stronger, contract a little bit more efficiently, pumping out more blood per beat, which helps us to reduce our heart rate. It also can help to manage blood pressure. All of these changes that we see with exercise essentially help us to make the heart more efficient and reduce the negative impact that we see with aging. Our goal is to try to reduce the amount of work that the heart has to do, and exercise can help make the heart more efficient. In addition to cardiovascular changes that we see, we also see critical changes in body composition. Now, the body is made up of two main components. We have fat mass and lean mass, also known as fat-free mass. As you can see on the pictures shown here, on the left you see a young, active, healthy individual, and the light gray is our muscle mass, and the darker gray along the outer edge is our fat mass, or our subcutaneous fat, just beneath the skin. On the right-hand side, however, you see an older individual who's more sedentary, and you notice that there's still muscle mass, but it's much smaller. There's a lot more dark gray embedded within the muscle, indicating that the muscle tissue has incurred a lot more fat, and that the subcutaneous fat levels have also increased significantly. This condition is known as sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is a condition that was identified by Rosenberg in 1989, and it is from the Greek roots sarx, meaning flesh, and penia, meaning poverty of loss. And the definition of sarcopenia is an age-related loss of muscle mass and muscle quality with aging. Now, muscle mass typically declines about 3 to 8% per decade, starting around the age of 30, and then we see that decline increase even more significantly after the age of 60. With muscle loss, we also see a change in function and quality. Motor units don't fire as well, so we see a decreased neural conductance to the muscle. We also see a loss of active motor units, which are the nerve and the muscle fibers that it innervates. we can see impaired calcium flow from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And calcium is a really vital component to allowing for the muscle to actually contract. Without optimal flow of calcium, we tend to see reduced muscle contraction. And then one major change that's really important, in particular with regards to the functional capacity of the muscle, is a loss of type 2 muscle fibers. Type 2 muscle fibers are those fibers that produce a lot of power during explosive movements. And when we talk about explosive movements with our students, they're thinking of powerlifting or activities that are very Olympic-based and jumping, things of that nature. But as we get older, activities such as climbing a flight of stairs, getting up out of bed, getting out of a chair, those are all more power-based movements. And those type 2 fibers are really vital to allowing us to engage in those activities successfully. And with sarcopenia, we see an extensive loss of type 2 fibers, which further exacerbates the fact that we are now seeing a loss in functional capacity of those muscles and no longer can generate a high amount of power to engage in activities. Now, sarcopenia is kind of a trickle-down effect. As we start to see a loss of muscle tissue, we see a decrease in strength, a decrease in power, and combined with muscle quality changes, we also see cardiovascular changes that result in muscle endurance decreasing. That makes activities more difficult, such as weight-bearing tasks. We see an increased risk of falls and fractures, and fatigue tends to be more easily incurred. With that, when people start to struggle to engage in activities, we often see them decline in their physical activity behaviors. That continues to exacerbate sarcopenia, and it continues to cycle around and around and around, leading to disability. So now we'll look at some aspects of flexibility and proprioception. Now, flexibility, we often see changes in our tendinous tissue. The elasticity that the tendons have tends to decrease with age. Also, the structural changes in the muscle with increasing collagen and fat tissue tends to reduce their flexibility, which can inhibit our range of motion and ability to engage in mobility-based tasks. Proprioceptors and balance also change as we age. We see muscle spindles, GTO, and joint receptors. Their responsiveness to change in muscle tension and tendon tension starts to decrease. So the feedback that the central nervous system gets with regards to our body's positioning starts to decrease. And therefore, we don't have as good a feedback and the ability to adjust during movement patterns. Obviously, also vision and vestibular senses, such as our inner ear, and touch receptors in our subcutaneous tissues and skin start to decrease, and therefore that also influences our proprioceptive ability. All of that will also relate to an increase in fall risk, an inability to kind of sense where we are in space, and for basic disturbances in environmental conditions now being dangerous and leading to tripping and falling. So those are kind of, unfortunately, a lot of the downsides of getting older. However, being from Springfield College, I'm sure many of you are very well aware that exercise plays a huge role in mitigating some of these factors and improving our health and our function ability throughout life. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Bergen to discuss exercise prescription.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. O'Neill. So this is an area that I've spent some time working with doing some work with our students too as well, through that special populations classes I heard Dean Redmond speak about before. So just to get a general concept and idea of how you can begin to integrate some of these exercises into your daily life. We talked a lot about some of the assessments that you can be using, and those assessments are great because they can also turn into some of your exercise routine or some of the training protocols that you can utilize. So we can take a minute to really look at some of the components that are going to be essential to think about when you're going to be a little bit more intentional with the type of movement or the type of exercise that you're going to be participating in. And all of these things can be really addressed in your daily living. It can be out of your home. Now that the weather is getting nicer, cardiovascular exercise is something that you can start to partake in. And even just thinking about how you can integrate that into your daily life is something that we'll talk about. All right, so the components to really think about are going to be cardiovascular exercise, working on that muscular strength and endurance like Dr. O'Neill was talking about, and this is going to be particularly important when we go back to that concept of sarcopenia and the concept of maintaining good, appropriate body composition. And then we looked at the influence of flexibility and range of motion, and how that's really going to have an influence on your mobility and your activities of daily life, something that we frequently forget about, the importance of range of motion, right? And then also proprioception, the importance of balance, right? Really trying to reduce that fall risk that we know is going to increase through that aging population. So how can we intentionally train for proprioception and for balance? Okay, so up on your screen, and I'm trying to give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the things that may be really safe and appropriate, just to get you thinking about some of the things that would fall within those categories. And so the ACSM, who is going to be one of our large governing bodies within sport medicine and physical activity and exercise, they're really recommending that for cardiovascular exercise, to spend 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes a day, 5 times to most days of the week. So if you can get 5 to 7 days of the week, that would be absolutely stellar. That 20 to 30 minutes is where you're going to start to begin to see improvements. So that's something that we really recommend for all populations. And the best mode of cardiovascular activity is going to be walking. All right, so walk, walk, walk. Try to get those 30 minutes of movement and cardiovascular exercise through walking. It's going to be low impact, but yet some weight-bearing exercise too as well. And then the next one we're going to look at and think about is climbing safe stairs. And I really like this because Dr. O'Neill spent some time talking about this too. And we're going to begin to integrate some of that cardiovascular exercise and our strength training through that same type of modality. So stair climbing is going to be a little bit of explosive in nature, but it's also going to get the heart rate elevated a little bit. And so if we want to think about making any cardiovascular changes and adaptations, trying to intentionally elevate the heart rate to a safe level that you can also return and recover from is going to be able to promote that cardiovascular health that we are looking for. And then if it's something that you're really interested in, and maybe this is just a little bit of my bias as I love to ride bikes, but riding a bike is something that's also going to help with proprioception. It's great. It's getting, the weather is getting nice out right now. Maybe some of you have access to cart paths or to bike paths. Makes it a great activity that will help improve that cardiovascular fitness. Then on the opposite side, we can begin to talk about balance. And so balance is something that if we can really spend that 10 to 15 seconds holding and maintaining that posture, it's going to become a little bit challenging for us, but it's going to help us adapt to that new demand of stability and balance. And I always tell individuals as they begin to progress and they begin to master some of these positions and holds, you can always extend that time and you can try to challenge yourself. Or you can progress to closing your eyes. We know, like we just talked about, the impact of the visual system on its proprioceptive mechanisms, but being able to progress to close your eyes. So even just by practice standing on one leg, putting a little bit of a soft bend in your knee and working on your balance. It really would be best if you were, and if it was appropriate to be barefooted or sock-footed, just so you can really get that feedback and proprioception from your feet as it goes up through your ankle and your knee will also help building some of those small stabilizing muscles. You can add your arms into it, whether you put your arms up over your head or out to your side, or maybe mimic some type of walking motion too as well, just to add a little bit of the change of the center of gravity to increase some of those balance demands. But that would be a great way, making sure that you're in a safe, comfortable environment. If you have something close to you to hang on to, whether it's the wall or the chair in front of you, those would all be some great ways to really intentionally train for that balance. And so next up, we can talk about some ways that we can address our muscular strength and endurance, right? So the area that I really like to spend some time on, is I always get this question about how much and how often should I be doing muscular strength? And so my first recommendation to you would be to stay in the area of 2 sets of 10 to maybe 15 reps. We can begin to work on some of our strength, and we can begin to work on some of our endurance within those rep ranges too as well. So 2 sets of 10 to 15 would be appropriate for this area. And so the general concept of sitting to standing, all right? So working on standing up from the chair, being really intentional about pushing your feet through the ground, standing up all the way to that upright position. You can put a table in front of you, or you can put a chair in front of you, something to even help assist you stand up. But going back to that power-based movement that we were talking about, also developing some of that strength through that lower body, making sure that you're working on that good sit to stand posture, nice big chest, shoulders down and back, nice proud chest would really address that core musculature and the posture as well. Wall push-ups are another great one. I know we know what a traditional push-up may look like, on the floor with your hands on the floor or an elevated surface. The wall works just as well. So being able to put your hands up on the wall right in front of your shoulders, push yourself down to what would be close to a 90-degree angle, and then pushing right back up. So addressing some of that upper body strength too as well, something you can do right at home with the walls around you. I like a standing leg extension too as well, being able to just drive your legs out in front of you, or if you can even do this sitting in a chair. Going back to some of the pictures that Dr. O'Neill showed before, even just extending your leg out to that 180 degrees straight level, squeezing the quadricep muscle is a great way to look at some of that lower body strength too as well. You could do any type of overhead pressing, going back to that shoulder mobility. As you got proficient, maybe if there was something that added some additional resistance that you had around the house. I know a lot of the textbooks will talk a lot about holding some cans of soup or some other type of can that's going to add just a little bit of that slight resistance. But as you adapt and you overcome that new strength that you have, being able to add something that's going to help maintain that stimulus and help you continuously adapt to those new strength gains. And then the last one that we can look at, and what we know that's also important, similar to the balance in terms of repetitions and sets on that side, is being able to hold some of those positions, for 10 to 15 to 20 seconds, whatever is going to be comfortable for you, and doing multiple sets of that. Flexibility and balance is something that's going to be really influential. So spending some additional time on that, maybe doing some of these more frequently throughout the week. Even when you're just sitting in the chair watching TV, or if you've just finished a meal, is a great time to integrate those. That seated toes touch is really excellent. So if you went back to the initial assessment that we showed you, that's a great way to work on some flexibility of the glute and the hamstring, that posterior side of the leg, the back side, something that's more commonly shortened based on a lot of the sitting and some of the activities we do. So being able to stretch that and elongate that, it's going to help with our posture, it's going to help with our gait in the long run. Okay? Arm circles, just to get the arms moving. Arm W's, making that W position with your arms, squeezing your shoulder blades down, bringing your elbows to the sides of your body. Something that really helps, just opening up that shoulder, making your posture feel good, bringing those shoulders down and back. Anything that you can really go through a full range of motion with your arms in multiple planes will be really helpful. And then any type of hip stretch with your arms. You can even, if you're flexible enough, you can pull your knee up to your chest. You could do a knee up to your chest in a seated position too as well. You can add the arms into that. But anything just to, cause some elongation within those areas of concern, right? And so going back to the initial assessments, we talked about those for a reason, because the hips, the shoulders, the posterior chain, those are going to be the areas that are going to be red flags in many cases. They are going to increase the risk of falling and just your overall strength, and they're the areas that are going to carry the most masses to begin with. So I know we probably went through that rather quickly, and a lot of those movements may be new to you, but there are definitely different ways that you can integrate exercise and balance and flexibility within your daily lives. And it's something that even if you don't have access to a formal exercise facility, even just in a chair, or within some of the components that you have within the household, would be appropriate to use too as well. So I think we may have some questions at this point.
Am I on? Okay, we do have some questions, and got several of them here. Let me try to put them in some order. There's a lot of information out in public on exercising 5 days a week of moderate activity or 10,000 steps. Could you speak to those as objective ways of exercising, and then maybe define what moderate activity is, please?
Sure, so that's a really great question, and like that was going back to what I was talking about with the ACSM and their recommendations. Really trying to engage in that 5 to 7 days of 30 minutes. And how you want to quantify that is going to be what's best for you. So 10,000 steps, that's probably the one we hear the most about in terms of a Fitbit or some of the, the accelerometers that you use. That's a great goal because that makes it intentional and it gives you something to strive for. So I'm a big proponent of the 10,000 steps. It's a really great tangible goal to utilize that. And something that, to gauge how hard you're working, so moderate exercise is kind of medium or middle of the road. And a common way that we've measured it, and I tell my students is a great way to look at it, is we'll utilize the talk test. So if you're walking with somebody or you are maybe slowly, if it's appropriate, getting up to like a slow jog, if you get to the point where you're no longer able to carry out a conversation, you've probably hit more of that vigorous end of the spectrum, where moderate would be you were able to carry on a conversation. You might have to take a little bit more of a deeper breath every once in a while, but being able to carry out a conversation would fall within that moderate range.
Another question which kind of fits the part of that answer is that there's a lot of high-tech equipment out there now to support exercises. You mentioned the Fitbit.
Right.
This person was at a store recently and got overwhelmed by the number of choices of pieces of equipment. And they're just interested in walking and doing some activity around the house. What would you recommend for a basic Fitbit or equivalent type of equipment?
Sure. So I know maybe Dr. O'Neill can talk. I know she's got one that she... and there's some basic models.
Yeah.
There's nothing. You even just need a regular clock. That 30 minutes of intentional physical activity is really what we're promoting here. But there's so many things out there, and just something basic. And it's a great way to make it tangible and to hold yourself accountable. And we talk a lot about accountability and adherence to exercise, and those tools really help. And as you progress, and maybe technology advances and what everybody's interested in, there's something out there for everybody, but you don't need to go, do anything extreme. It's something basic just to have some accountability if that's something that you need, I would say.
Thank you. Another interesting question. This person is a caregiver to a person in the family and has a limited time to exercise.
Sure.
Is there some way to rank in importance some of the dimensions of exercise that you mentioned tonight, like cardiovascular or strength or flexibility or balance, that they could emphasize with limited time?
I'm guessing if they're a caregiver, they're getting a lot of activity to begin with. I would say maybe do some of those assessments and see where they have the biggest deficits and issues to address within their own fitness. So doing some of the flexibility assessments or the chair stand test and see where they fall within the norms and maybe what those areas they need to target most within their training.
Okay, thank you. This person is quite healthy. They're in their mid to late 60s, and they started exercising and developed some pain. And they were really concerned, so they stopped exercising. Should they have stopped exercising when they had this discomfort, they used the word pain, or work through it?
Do not work through pain. Certainly you're going to incur muscle soreness or things of that nature, which is fairly natural with activity, especially if they're starting a strength training program. But ideally, if they have sharp pain or chest discomfort, that's an indication that they should certainly see their physician and get more information as to what might be causing the pain before they move forward. But I would encourage them to seek out some assistance with that so that they don't miss too much exercise. It might be a simple remedy to address it. And maybe finding other activities that can still allow them to be active without the pain.
You mentioned the term, I think, delayed muscle soreness. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? That's an interesting
Yes, so
term.
DOMS, or delayed muscle soreness, is something that essentially the muscle develops some damage as you start to do new activities such as strength training. And when that occurs, it's a natural process and leads to strengthening the muscles over time. You don't want to train too intensely. Otherwise, you can end up having some serious side effects of some of that delayed onset muscle soreness. We want to develop a little bit of soreness. That's an indication that you are stressing your muscles and causing them to adapt, but you don't want to go overboard. So starting out with, like what Dr. Bergen said, with 2 sets of about 10 repetitions, and then see how you feel, and then you can progress from there, but don't start out too difficult.
If I want to join a gym, what should I look for in a gym for someone in their mid-60s?
Well, that's a good question. Certified trainers, certainly, we definitely encourage people to look for qualified staff. So you want to work with someone who has either an American College of Sports Medicine or an NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning Association, or a NASM certification. That's an indication that they're hiring qualified individuals. I would definitely recommend looking for a very cleanly place. Certainly that's going to be important for hygiene purposes and things of that nature. And then equipment and facilities that you'll actually enjoy engaging in. Certainly the big draw to going to a facility is making sure that they have what you want, and that's going to keep you going back.
Okay, we have one final question here. I think it's an interesting one, very practical. This person has arthritis in both knees and hips. Can they still exercise? Should they still exercise? They would certainly love to avoid joint replacements.
Sure. We actually literally just talked about this in class today. So I think it's a really great idea, and this is a good segue back from the question that Dr. O'Neill just answered, and this is a really great time if this is something that you're really mindful of and you want to be aware of. Working with an individual may be your best avenue if that is something that you're able to do. But I think we want to promote exercise through that condition too as well, and trying to maintain strength, build some new stability, build some additional strength within that experience, and understanding that where the line between pain may come and what's going to be an appropriate movement for you that's not going to put you into pain. And so we talked about the process also of joint replacement and being able to really emphasize and develop and build strength. That may eventually be down the road, but if we can put you in a better position prior to that surgery, your recovery process is going to be much better. We talked about that too with an injury rate. Being able to lower and reduce our injury rates through new strength and through mobility and balance and all of those things. But unfortunately, if these things do happen, being able to come on the other side through that recovery process and making that process a little bit easier. But just understanding what movements are comfortable for you and what modalities are comfortable for you would make exercise an appropriate endeavor through that osteoarthritis condition that you may be working through.
Okay, thank you. Great questions, great answers, great information. We'd like to conclude the program with some thank yous. We'd like to start with our viewers for thank you for sharing some of your time with us this evening. We're hopeful your knowledge and commitment to wellness is stronger than it was when we started. We absolutely would like to start with I'd like to thank Dr. O'Neill and Dr. Bergen for a terrific presentation, and we'd like to thank Tammy Cadess in the Alumni Relations Office, and a particular thank you to the faculty and the students of the Communications and Sports Journalism Department and program who ran this. This event is so Springfield College. This is experiential learning at its best. One faculty member in the back of the room and a group of learning students producing a terrific program, so thank you. We'd love your feedback. We'd like your feedback on tonight's program, and we'd like your feedback on future programs. So again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.